Hello. Hi, everyone. Would you please take your seats? Hi, everyone. Please take your seats so we can hear the next speakers. Everybody here in front, please sit, have a seat. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I hope that was a really good circadian meal feeding time. Welcome to all of you and the 39 trillion bacteria that are on or inside of each of you. As we say, you are not alone. I'm going to introduce right now the subject of the panel we're going to have, and the subject is the microbiome. So after I introduce the subject, I'm going to introduce one of two speakers. Then we're going to have a panel discussion, and then a Q&A with the audience. So, several hundred years ago, Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. So that was several hundred years ago, and only about 15 years ago, we started hearing about this new area of research called the microbiome. Sometimes it's called the invisible organ because it's the missing piece in our knowledge about health and longevity. And now we have the appearance and the importance of the gut-brain axis, and that's going to be very, very special. We've even heard that 90% of all chronic disease has been linked to the microbiome, this invisible, incredibly complex organ, so to speak. So what promise does a better understanding of the microbiome and the gut-brain axis hold for disease prevention and brain performance? We're going to hear from our panel. One of the panelists, Dr. Robynne Chutkan, was not able to make it from Washington, D.C. for today's panel, but we have two other outstanding panelists who did make it today. And I'm going to introduce first Dr. Vincent Pedre. Dr. Pedre is the medical director of Pedre Integrative Health and the founder of Dr. Pedre, Wellness and Functional Medicine practitioner in private practice in New York. In 2018, Dr. Pedre joined the faculty of the Institute of Functional Medicine, teaching the first ever introductory functional medicine courses to practitioners in Peru, Australia, and Mexico. So apparently functional medicine is spreading. He believes that the gut is the gateway to better health, better brain, and excellent health. As the best-selling author of Happy Gut, the cleansing program to help you lose weight, gain energy, and eliminate pain, he has helped thousands of people restore their digestive and gut-related health issues. So I'm going to now call on Dr. Pedre. He'll come up and speak about 20 minutes, and then going to introduce our next panelist. Then we'll have a panel discussion and Q&A. So welcome, Dr. Pedre.
Thank you. Glenda, you gave me the tough spot right after they eat.
Oh.
So let's start with sitting up in your chairs, and let's put one hand on your chest, another hand on your belly. Close your eyes and become aware of your breathing. Now let me have you breathe into the hand that's over your belly. We're going to change our focus now. So we've been talking a lot of cerebral stuff, foods, and now we're going to look at the body from the perspective of the gut. So let's get into our intuitive selves, breathing into our gut. And I'm going to talk about the gut microbiome, which I understand a lot of people don't understand what that is. The microbiome is the summation of all the different organisms, bacteria, viruses, parasites, worms even, that live inside or on our body. But out of all those zones, and there's a lot of different zones, there's a microbiome in the nose, a microbiome in the mouth, a microbiome inside your stomach, your small intestine, but the biggest reservoir is your large intestine. And that reservoir is estimated to be up to, I've heard numbers much higher than 39 billion, up to 100 trillion, when we're accounting for the viruses, the bacteriophages, which are the viruses that live inside the gut, which actually outnumber the bacteria. So this system outnumbers our cells 10 to 1. And the combined DNA of the bacterial population in and on our bodies outnumbers our own DNA 100 to 1. And it's estimated that the human body does not encode for enough genes to perform all the processes that are necessary for excellent health, that we actually depend on this symbiotic dance with our microbiome. So let's talk about this. And one more thing, Max isn't here, but I was going to say that it's the microbiome that is responsible for the positive effects of dark chocolate, because it has antioxidants called polyphenols. The polyphenols are too big to be absorbed. Actually, the microbiome has to digest it into smaller anti-inflammatory molecules that then get absorbed into the body. So this is a picture of what my health index looks. It's not scientific. It's a made-up graph. But the blue is my health index, and the one is how the gut microbiome builds throughout life. But my gut microbiome got completely decimated during my teenage years when I started getting throat infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, sinusitis. I was on round after round of antibiotics. Doctors kept telling me, my parents, the pediatricians, that my immune system was not strong enough. I needed to be on a multivitamin. They didn't know what was going on. I actually lost a lot of weight when I went through my teenage growth spurt, and then I could never gain weight. Now looking back, I recognize that what happened is my microbiome had been decimated by antibiotics. And as a result, I had developed leaky gut. And I'm going to talk about that. And that led to food sensitivities. And the two biggest food groups as a teenager were wheat, which has gluten, and dairy. So I became sensitive to these two food groups, and they were causing inflammation in my body. So it wasn't until my 20s I started changing my diet. I took dairy out because I was constantly trying to hack, how can I not get sick? And I found when dairy went out of my diet, I stopped getting sick as often. And that was my first aha. I was in medical school at the time. They weren't teaching us nutrition, but I was always keenly interested in how diet affects our health. Then it wasn't until 30s when I started discovering functional medicine, and I was able to heal my gut through what I learned in functional medicine and started working with patients and became very passionate about the role of the gut microbiome in all aspects of our health. So I start with a picture of a tree that kind of looks like the DNA double helix. And because a lot of times when I talk about the gut, I talk about it as our root system. And for a tree, the roots are extremely important, right? So if the tree becomes sick, if the leaf looks ill, are you going to paint it green so it looks nice and pretty again? In Western medicine, do we give a medication that is a Band-Aid on top of a symptom, or look at the root system? If you speak to any farmer, agriculturalist, if the leaves are sick, where do they look? They look at the roots. You heal the tree through the roots and through the soil. What I'm going to teach today is that you heal the body through its root system, which is the gut. And I'm going to give you some really practical takeaways, I hope, that you can start doing right away. So if you don't deal with the roots, then the tree dies. Now let's look at the outside world. 25% of the planet's biodiversity is found in the soil. And our soil is under threat. And I think we always have to interrelate what's happening in the outside world to what's happening in our digestive system inside our bodies. Because I love what Maria Rodale, who's the granddaughter of the founder of the organic movement, once told me. She said that the soil is basically, the soil is the digestive system of the earth. And it's quite complex. Well, for us, we have the microbiome. And that microbiome that lives inside of us, I would argue, is one of the most complex ecosystems on the planet. We are still trying to understand how this symbiotic system affects our health. And we know that there's this whole gut-brain axis. So when I had you breathe and tune into your abdomen, get into your intuitive center, I was bringing you into your second brain. And everybody knows, everybody says you get a gut feeling about things. So we have the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the gut, and there's actually more neurons firing up back to the brain from the gut than there are downstream from the vagus nerve. But it's a two-way system. So we know if somebody has a traumatic brain injury, it causes changes in the way the vagus nerve signals, and it increases the permeability of the gut, and you get leaky gut syndrome, which I'm going to talk about. Max talked about ketones. Does anybody here drink bulletproof coffee? Yeah, or put MCT oil in your coffee or your tea? So when you do that, the MCTs get absorbed to the liver, they get converted into ketone bodies, like beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and those ketone bodies go to the brain. They're actually the best fuel for the brain. The brain can operate really sharply on ketone. The alternate fuel for the brain is sugar. So that's why there's been such a resurgence of this keto diet for a lot of things. It can be used in cases of refractory epilepsy. It's found to be helpful. But a lot of people are using it because of brain health and improving the functioning of the brain. So let's look at this system. You know, are we perhaps equal parts bacteria, equal parts human? But who really is in control? Are we in control? Or are we just reproductive systems for the gut microbiome? This is the human phylogenetic tree of the microbiome that lives on all different surfaces. I know it's very small, but you can see how complex it is, and it is divided into multiple zones. So there's even a microbiome that lives in the creases of your hands. And in between the creases are almost like deserts. There's barely any bacteria in there. And same like I said, in the mouth, in the vaginal tract, inside the intestines, around the teeth. And all these microbiomes have a very important effect on how healthy you are or what types of diseases you develop. So I get to my happy gut principle number 1. Diversity is the key to wellness. Let's look at what happens to the gut and what's happening in Western society with the type of things that are insults to the gut, like alcohol, the standard American diet, antibiotics, stress, even over-the-counter medications like NSAIDs, and even birth control pills have been found to increase gut permeability in a low-fiber diet. So that leads to something that we call dysbiosis. So dysbiosis is basically just an imbalance between the good guys and the bad guys. Do we have all good in the gut? No. About 10-15% of what is inside our gut are what we would call pathogenic bacteria, but they probably serve a purpose in balance with the good bacteria. It's when that balance shifts and you get more of those pathogenic bacteria, that's what's called a dysbiosis. And that dysbiosis leads to a disturbance in the gut lining. And if the gut lining becomes disturbed, you start not being able to absorb nutrients properly. Your gut starts becoming inflamed. And eventually you develop this thing we call leaky gut. And leaky gut is just another colloquial term for increased intestinal permeability. And for a long time, this was a term that was really spearheaded by naturopathic physicians, and Western medicine poo-pooed on it until a research scientist, Alessio Fasano, actually showed and proved that you can measure this, and there's a molecule that mediates the permeability of the gut almost like a dimmer switch. So you want your gut to be able to allow good nutrients through. You just don't want those holes to be too big to allow bad things, or even partially digested proteins, which our immune system will attack. Because you see 70% of the immune system is all along the gut lining, and it's surveying and sampling everything that comes through and asking, is this okay, or is this faux? So when you develop leaky gut, you can start to develop food reactions. Everybody knows what a food allergy is, like a peanut allergy, a pine nut allergy. These are indolent reactions. These are not mediated by the same part of the immune system that does that really fast reaction that you get with a food allergy. So these are things that you might not notice are happening, but you're getting migraines, you have irritable bowel syndrome, you're getting hives. And a lot of times, even though these issues seem to be on the surface, they're actually related to what's going on in the gut, including inflammatory arthritis. I've had patients where I've reversed what was called a nonspecific inflammatory arthritis by a rheumatologist by looking at the gut, finding the dysbiosis, the imbalances, which could also be yeast overgrowth, fixing it, and all the inflammatory symptoms disappear. So where was that diagnosis? And eventually, you can develop autoimmune disease. And we know celiac disease, which is an autoimmune reaction to gluten, but there's other autoimmune diseases that are related even to celiac or to increased permeability of the gut, like autoimmune thyroid disease, which affects 8 times as many women as men. So this is a schematic from my book, what a healthy gut versus a leaky gut looks like. So I really love visuals. You can see that a healthy gut has the cells, which is only one cell layer thick, right? So just think about that. You just have one cell layer between you and what I call your inside-outside world. Because everything you eat, everything you're exposed to comes through your digestive system. And these cells sit together through these tight junctions like Velcro. And when you get a leaky gut, you get the insults that increase gut permeability, like dysbiosis, for example. Or you take an ibuprofen, which also increases gut permeability. They start to loosen up. And you have the spaces between the cells become bigger, and now molecules that should not be getting through can get through into your body, and lo and behold, the immune system is on the other side waiting to see what's happening. So going back to the outside world, this is me in Machu Picchu, actually about 1.5 years ago. And what I found really fascinating about this, because remember my first Happy Gut principle is diversity is the key to wellness. Well, the Incas were basically harvesting diversity in their crop. When you look at the irrigation system of these terraces, they were not growing food to be eaten. They were growing food in micro temperature zones, because each one, as you go up, is slightly different temperature zone. They were adapting plants to different conditions. So if you go to Peru, you have over 100 different types of corn, 100 different types of potatoes. The Incas understood that diversity was their way to hedge against environmental changes, perhaps more rain one year, less rain another year. And I find that really fascinating, because as we go into monoculture, where things are becoming one, and we're affecting the diversity of our food supply, well then how does that affect the diversity of our gut microbiome? So let's look at a traditional hunter-gatherer tribe, one of the last groups left on Earth, the Hadza of Tanzania. There's about 1,000 of them, and a quarter of those still eat the traditional hunter-gatherer diet. So they've been decimated, as you can see. Their territory is becoming smaller and smaller. And what do they eat? So this traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the diet is composed of just 5 foods: tubers, wild meats, and this can be small to medium to even large game animals, berries, baobab fruit, which comes from this beautiful tree here, It's from the Lion King. And it's really full in fiber. The baobab actually is used by the women of the Hadza tribe to wean their kids off of breast milk. They take the pulp and the seed and they mash it up and grind it, and that becomes a porridge that they feed the kids as they're weaning off, and it's very fiber rich. So children of the Hadza are eating about 100 grams of fiber a day. The adults are eating about 50 grams. Adult Americans are eating between 10 and 15 grams of fiber. And the crazy thing about the wild meats, I heard somebody who's lived with a Hadza give a lecture. He said he saw a hunter kill a zebra, which the Hadza have exceptions, so they can still kill animals that traditionally did in the past. No one else can kill a zebra. He saw him slice it open, take the stomach out, empty the contents, and eat the stomach right there on the field, sushi style. Now that is quite an exposure for the microbiome. So their diet is 70% plants, very high in fiber, and then 30% game meats. And it's seasonal because not all the foods are available all year round. And the honey, by the way, that they eat is not honey that's coming in a nice little jar in a container. No, they're taking the honeycomb and eating it with the larvae, which are really full of healthy fats. When I first saw honey, I was thinking, how can they just eat a honey? No, they're getting the full spectrum of everything that you get with honey, the propolis, the bee wax. So the diet varies, but the biggest part of the diet is tubers. They eat tubers year-round, and what do tubers have? They have fiber. Tubers are rich in fiber. So kind of thinking back to what Max was talking about diversity in the diet. Oh my gosh, already? They looked at the gut microbiome of the Hadza, and they have greater diversity than an Italian control that they tested. And they're eating primarily these 5 foods. So is it really diversity of choices in the diet, or is it a lack of fiber in our diet that's causing a decimation of the microbiome? But there are other big threats to biodiversity, right? And the first one is doctors. We are the biggest threats to the diversity of the gut microbiome because doctors prescribe too many antibiotics. Now, antibiotics save lives, and I use antibiotics in my practice because sometimes people think when I lecture that I'm anti-antibiotics. No, antibiotics save lives. But what I think needs to happen is antibiotics need to be used judiciously when they're actually necessary, and not giving an antibiotic to nip a cold when it's really caused by a virus. So I work more on looking at fortifying the immune system so the body can do the job that it's supposed to do. And that's through what I learned from being a child and having had to be on so many rounds of antibiotics. I don't want to go on an antibiotic regimen. If I get sick, I support my immune system, let my body take care of it. But then we have pesticides, and we have all these household cleaners with chemicals that we call endocrine disruptors. And all these things can basically act as antimicrobial agents, antibacterial soap. But here's another threat to biodiversity. Yeah. Sweets, a monochromatic diet, so mostly yellows and beige, missing a lot of different nutrients there. So thinking back to what Max said about all the different colors, the blueberries, the greens, raspberries, you need to eat the rainbow of nutrients. And then we have genetically modified foods. Monsanto, whose byline is innovation, collaboration, speed, but perhaps it should read exploitation, contamination, greed. Thank you. And you can just spray Roundup. I mean, and when people spray Roundup in their yards, they're inhaling the Roundup. So it gets into your system, and Roundup has glyphosate. We know that glyphosate is actually patented as an antimicrobial agent. So I'm going to run through. I'm running out of time, and I don't want to run out of time. So I'm going to talk about something called diet-induced endotoxemia. So we found that diets that are rich in sugar, flour, and refined seed oils increase something called endotoxin, which is a measurable state, and that increases the risk for obesity, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. So how does this work? Lipopolysaccharide, which is endotoxin, gets into your body. It stimulates a receptor that causes an inflammatory cascade. We get an increase in insulin resistance, so your blood sugar rises, and you get, because your insulin levels start to rise, you get more belly fat in the middle, and it leads to obesity. But if you look at the diagram, there are lipopolysaccharide receptors all over the body, and guess what? They're also in the brain. So when lipopolysaccharide gets through the gut border, it's quite able to get through that blood-brain barrier, and it turns on inflammatory pathways in the brain as well. So if we look at this another way, maybe you get dysbiosis, leaky gut, increased intestinal permeability. You get a drop in a very important organism that's called Akkermansia muciniphilia. Muciniphilia means it eats mucus, so it loves the gut border. An increase in lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin, and it short circuits your metabolism, and it puts your brain on fire. And what is a brain on fire? A brain on fire is a depressed brain. So there we have another connection between the gut-brain axis. And I'm going to kind of speed past this one and go to my happy gut principle number 2, which is to eat plenty of pre- and probiotic-rich foods. So I'll let you take a picture of that. And really thinking about going to farmers markets, things that are locally grown. Look at the variety here. Look at the rainbow of colors in these foods. When you're eating these types of foods, onions, garlic, Jerusalem artichoke, dandelion greens, all these foods have prebiotic nutrients that are food for your gut microbiome. So if you wonder, how can I increase the diversity of my gut microbiome? You start with your diet. And then you can look at cultured foods as well. So kimchi, sauerkraut. You want to incorporate a rotation of those in your diet. And of course, the superfoods that Max talked about earlier today. So adopting a high-fiber diet actually, for diabetic patients, resulted in a drop in their blood glucose. So improve their blood glucose regulation. So again, I ask you again, is what's happening in the body an issue of the pancreas in the body, or is it a microbiome issue? Apparently, it's more being regulated by the microbiome than we understand. So happy gut principle number 3, I kind of took it from Michael Pollan in a way. Eat organic, mostly plants, avoid antibiotics unless absolutely necessary. Judicious use of antibiotics. And eat organic so you're not being exposed to pesticides like glyphosate, for example, and I should say non-GMO as well. So when we look at gut health, we think of all these diseases, Crohn's, celiac, reflux, ulcers, and maybe you have these symptoms, bloating, acid reflux, cramping, gas, constipation, but we never think of gut-associated diseases. And these are all conditions that are potentially associated with your gut health. Asthma, allergies, eczema, migraines, hives, autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune thyroiditis. All of these things have interconnections with the gut. So that brings me to happy gut principle number 4. Healing begins in the gut. But how do you get there? You also need some balance. These are my niece and nephew and me. If anyone's been to Cusco, you recognize that this is the view over the city. That brings me to number 5. You have to rest to digest. So kind of thinking back to what Dr. Panda talked about the circadian rhythm, turning down the lights, getting away from the TV, you're also allowing your nervous system to wind down at night. You cannot heal if you are in an agitated state, and I can tell you now, after over a decade of treating gut patients, I am starting to believe that the number one issue that needs to be addressed first is stress, and then diet, and then the gut microbiome. But if you cannot get rid of the way that they react to things, You don't get rid of the stress layer. The stress is an attack on your gut. That has to be dealt with through things like meditation, yoga, Tai Chi. It could be knitting. I tell people, you have to find the thing that kind of gets you into that zone where time stands still. Walk on the beach, going into the forest, horseback riding, things where you connect with nature, because nature lowers cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone. So cultivating a happy gut and a microbiome, to summarize, it's all about diversity. It's not about being clean. It's actually about getting out and getting dirty and exposing yourself to soil, to getting out in nature. They actually show that people who have pets, like dogs, who lick you in the face, have more diverse microbiome. And the other thing that actually increases diversity, and if you look at the blue zones, where people live to 100, they're usually multi-generational households. The microbiome is shared through the generations because as you get older, your microbiome starts to decimate, it starts to change. But in those people who live in these multi-generational households, there's a sharing of the younger microbiome with the older microbiome, and perhaps that is part of what keeps them more vital. Prebiotics, things like yogurt, kefir, fermented foods, kombucha. Detox and elimination is very important. Moving your bowels, because when you hold stool in for too long, then it's allowing all the toxins that are being pushed out of your body, it allows them to recirculate. And that could be environmental toxins that you've absorbed from exposures. But also meditation, listening, gratitude. I think gratitude is something really key and important, something that I try to teach people to get them into the present moment and to get them out of negative thought patterns is to be in gratitude and to feel that gratitude in their body, not just their brain, but to feel it in your body. And in the end, it's really about creating a balance between all of these factors. So this is me. I'm the author of this book, Happy Gut, which I know is out there for you later. Thank you for listening. Sorry I had to go really fast, so I hope that you took away some really important pointers, and I look forward to connecting with all of you.
I want to introduce Dr. Momo. It's Dr. Momo Vuyisich, kind of, but he insists that we call him Momo. And Momo, or Dr. Momo as I call him, is a founder and chief science officer of a company called Vuyisich. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of New Mexico. And he spent 12 years at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where his research focused on modern genomics in relation to the gut microbiome. Now, Dr. Momo actually wants to change the world. And he especially wants to change the way healthcare is organized. He would like that each person, given the right tools and apps, to take control of his or her own health without going to the doctor and without taking prescription pills for life. So Dr. Momo has lots of tips that we can all relate to. He has told me, and I'm not sure I translated it right, that NSAIDs like Advil and Motrin increase intestinal permeability or leaky gut in as little as 24 hours after ingestion. That's not good. Why didn't somebody tell us? Let's hear what Dr. Momo says about how to make disease elective by precision nutrition. Welcome, Dr. Momo.
Hi, everyone. Speaking of gratitude, thank you, Vincent. That was a fantastic presentation. And I'm also very grateful to Dr. Robynne Chutkan, who is not here. I've never met her, but she's a pioneer in this field. And I would encourage everyone to go watch her YouTube videos about rewilding your gut. So I think she invented that term, although I'm not sure, but just search rewilding your gut, and she'll give you lots and lots of tips about how to introduce the lost members of your gut microbiome back inside your gut. So thank you for the introduction, Glenda. So I want to point out some things. I actually made this slide just 20 minutes ago in response to some of the previous talks and something that's out there. What I want to highlight here is that you're not the average human. And every time you read anything about any study, that is the average human. And there's not a single person in this room that is that average human. So just think about that when you read a study. Does that really apply to you? And we at our company have data to show that it does not apply to any one human. It's a nice graph. It shows trends and risks, and it can be useful, but it doesn't really apply to you. And so none of us are average. So, for example, Max talked this morning about how eggs are great for you. Eggs are great for some people, but for others, eggs carry lecithin. If you have the gut microbiome members that process that lecithin into TMA, and it gets into your body, it gets converted to TMAO, it's one of the most powerful promoters of heart disease. And so eggs are not good for everyone. So please take that into consideration. Spinach. We have more than 50,000 customers whose stool samples we've analyzed. Almost 50% of those customers, spinach is toxic to them because spinach has oxalates. Research it. Spinach has oxalates, high levels of oxalates. Those are, if they're not converted by the gut microbiome, if they're not consumed, they will enter your body and cause kidney stones, and no one wants that. And so all of these studies, when you hear one day coffee is great for you, and then you're like, awesome. You go drink lots of coffee, and then a month later, whoops, coffee is not good for you. It's because the group of people that they chose for each one of those studies, the average of that group that they chose responded in such a way. Every person in that study responded differently. And so please take that into consideration. Look at this, biologic drugs. So biologic drugs are used to treat autoimmune diseases. They're the most expensive drugs on the market, very powerful modifiers of the immune system. They cost $20,000 to $40,000 a year, and they are miraculous for some people. But for others, they cause way more problems than the initial problem that caused the prescription of these drugs. And so when you hear all those commercials on TV, take that seriously. Look at the side effects of these drugs. Someone who's never had Crohn's disease in their entire life takes one biologic because their joints hurt, and then they develop Crohn's disease 3 days later. And then they have it as long as they're taking them. And then as soon as they withdraw the drug, they go back to normal. So when anything that anyone says this works, it works for an average person. You're not the average. And so that's really what my talk is about. It's precision nutrition. Another context I want to give is Hadza tribe, for example, or some other tribes, or the blue zones in Greece and Japan. You do not have their lifestyle. You wake up first thing in the morning, and you're going to get stressed and hurry up and hit the traffic and go to work and deal with people at work and then be in traffic again. Those people in a Greek village, if you've never been to a blue zone, they have never experienced that, okay, never in their 90 years. I've spoken with them, and when I speak to a 96-year-old Greek, they don't look any older than 60, and they're crisp, right? But they've never had a stressful moment in their life. So please don't say, oh, I'm going to eat Mediterranean diet and I'm going to be like them. That's not going to happen. Your lives are very different, profoundly different. Okay, so there is no one diet and lifestyle that is good for everyone. That we have data to prove that, and I will show you some of those data today. And everyone needs personalized nutrition and lifestyle, everyone. And that's what my company is about, and that's my entire scientific career. I worked very hard to develop the technologies that enable the company that I'm currently running, and then I left the scientific field and started a company, and that's what we're doing now. So what is my goal and the goal of my company? It's not to make money, it's not to go public, it's not to become famous, none of those things. It's to develop machine-learned algorithms. These are objective algorithms for personalized nutrition that prevents and treats chronic diseases. And I will show you an example of that every customer today of Vuyisich can use, such that when we analyze someone's stool sample and the lab staff says this sample passes quality control, 100% of the work that takes from that molecular data to someone being told what to eat and what not to eat is done by machines. 100%. It's not 99.9 or 99.99. It is 100% mathematical algorithms, and they're based on massive amounts of data. And so that's exactly what we need. We don't need an advice from a nutritionist. We don't need an advice from someone with anecdotal experience. We need mathematical algorithms, and that's what we're trying to bring on. Please don't think that we have a formula for everything. We do not. We're just starting out. The revolution has started, but there's a lot more work to do. So here's my story that drove this whole thing. So at 25, I started experiencing autoimmune disease, which is rheumatoid arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis and carpal tunnel syndrome. And by the time I was 40, the most that modern medicine could do is paint my leaves green. Thank you very much for that. That was awesome, right? So I took years of NSAIDs. I was taking drugs that make me maybe incontinent, right? To treat my rheumatoid arthritis, they give me a drug that makes me pee uncontrollably, and I have to wear diapers from the time I'm 37 until I die. How ridiculous is that? That is absolutely the most ridiculous thing, to accept that. I was absolutely not willing to accept that. Well, after 2 days. So I didn't realize how bad it was going to be. So I was headed for a hip replacement. My right hip was locking up, right, at the age of 40. And they said, well, you can be in a wheelchair or you can get your hips replaced. And so all I did is I read one study, I made one profound diet change, and not only did my disease stop, it completely reversed and I completely healed myself, completely. This is a medical miracle. I've worked now with many rheumatologists. I currently am setting up some very large trials on autoimmune diseases, and I'm working with one of the leading rheumatologists in the country. Every single doctor says what has happened to you is medically impossible. The only thing that drugs can do is slow down your disease. They can delay the symptoms. They cannot cure it. And I made one diet switch, and that's what happened. Okay, so now let's talk about Max's presentation. So Max recommends beef, right? I ate a ketogenic diet in the fall of 2014. I lost my ability to memorize things in those 3 months, and that hasn't fully recovered yet. Now, I have friends who have been on keto diet for 5 years, and they love it. Love it, love it, love it, okay? So when someone says ketogenic diet is great, or a Mediterranean diet is great, or this diet is great, there are now over 1,000 diets. They are all wrong, 100%. Because there is no one diet that's good for everyone. It just does not exist. And so let's keep going. So this is sort of a philosophical thing, but academics unfortunately study small populations. You're not going to learn how to help 7 billion people by studying 10 people. And that's why we have this conflicting research. One day something's good, one day something's bad, right? The same thing is bad. It's hard to tell. Big Pharma has no interest in disease prevention. They don't want to teach you how to fish. They want to sell you fish for the rest of your life. And so this is what sparked me to start our company. And look at the stats from CDC. 60% of US adults have a chronic disease. That is an epidemic that is simply now accepted as sort of, well, that's how it is. But now we have the technology to solve all this problem, and we're running as fast as we can at Vuyisich to actually address the root cause of these diseases and not to just paint the leaves green. So let's talk about the gut-brain connection. So the gut microbiome produces neurotransmitters. Those are listed. It regulates the immune system. 70% of the immune system is lining the gut. It's not in the blood. The vagus nerve that Vincent told us about, I'll touch upon it. And then the brain controls intestinal motility. It induces secreting of all kinds of molecules that regulate our gut microbiome, and it also induces immune response. This is that vagus nerve that Vincent mentioned. There are 100 to 500 million neurons. I mean, that's a staggering number. 100 to 500 million neurons lining our gut. And we don't know what they do. We know some things, but we know very, very little. So there's so much more to be discovered. I'll now give you some literature references. So gut microbiome is able to stimulate serotonin production in our gut lining, so that's pretty cool. Gut microbes can consume GABA, and so which GABA has a calming effect. Gut microbiome and autism, you guys should all read this paper. This was led by 2 professors at Arizona State University. They simply transferred poop from healthy children to children with autism. That's all they did. And this is literally a medical miracle. There is no doctor in the world that can actually achieve anything similar to this. After 2 years, they followed up these children, and their autism was reduced by 50%. This is simply a miracle, and all they did is transferred poop, nothing else. So we don't understand yet exactly the mechanism of that, and the FDA may slow things down, but they're trying hard, and we're trying to help them. So gut microbiome and epilepsy, Vincent mentioned that it's been observed that ketogenic diet can actually reduce or eliminate epilepsy, and now there are a couple of companies, and this particular research project here showed that it's specific microbes that are responsible for this effect, and now there are companies that are trying to bring up probiotics that can actually treat epilepsy. So imagine just swallowing a pill with 2 bacterial species in there, and your epilepsy is completely gone. That would be wonderful. Gut and oral microbiome and Alzheimer's, so both have been associated with Alzheimer's. There's a particular microbe that's called Porphyromonas gingivalis that has been found in the lesions of the brain that cause Alzheimer's, and that microbe lives in our mouth. So it's very possible, this is my hypothesis, so it's not found anywhere else, it's very possible that this microorganism, due to inflammation, can cross into the bloodstream from our gums, and then due to, again, inflammation, our blood-brain barrier becomes leaky, and those microbes can actually enter the brain, where the innate immune system in the brain actually swallows them and encapsulates them into these lesions. And so that could be the cause of Alzheimer's. So it could be that simple, basically. It's the combination of a microbe crossing from the gums to the blood, and then inflammation, systemic inflammation causing a blood-brain barrier inflammation that allows this microbe to enter the CNS. So we don't know yet. It's just a hypothesis. There's others as well. Parkinson's disease. It's now been essentially proven that the gut microbiome plays a critical role in the onset of Parkinson's disease, and it's a very complex role. If you see here, I've listed 3 studies. Gut microbiome may cause Parkinson's disease, but it also, in treatment of the disease, we currently use levodopa therapy, and gut microbiome was just recently shown to consume that drug. And so when people are given this drug, they have various responses. Again, the average response is good, but that varies from great response to no response. And it's been shown now that the gut microbiome is responsible for the variability in those responses. So we may be able to have a gut microbiome test that tells the doctor exactly what the dosing should be for this Parkinson's drug and make it much more effective. Gut microbiome and multiple sclerosis, there are such strong connections that there's almost no doubt that that's what it is. So let's talk about depression. So the most prevalent disease in the world, more than 300 million people worldwide have it, and 80% of those people's lives are affected in some sort of way. Drugs work, but with major drawbacks. You can go and read about the side effects of the drugs and the difficulty with switching from drug to drug. So, sorry, Dennis, I'm going to show this study. So this study basically shows that all of the genetic determinants connected where people have identified different genes associated with depression, that's likely false discovery, which means that those genes are not truly connected with depression. And the jury is still out, but what really helps with depression is diet. And so this was a SMILES trial out of Deakin University in Australia, and we've been now working with this group since they published the paper, and they showed that their modified Mediterranean diet can actually reduce clinical symptoms of depression. And so, again, on average, it worked well, but some people responded really well, others did not respond. And so we are now building machine-learned models or algorithms that can tell every single person exactly what to eat and what not to eat so that their depression is going to be lowered. We haven't demonstrated that it works, and so we don't know, but anecdotally, we see great results. Look at this study. Simple fecal microbiome transplant. You take poop from a healthy person, put it inside a person with depression, and it treats depression. Nothing else. That's amazing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about now what we're doing at Vuyisich and how we're trying to address these problems. So this is technical, but I'll try to present it in a way that everyone can understand it. So on this slide, this is sort of the way we think of the human body. The human body is, we bring in nutrition, and when we think about nutrition, our computers don't think in terms of wheat and rice. They think in terms of what are the molecules that are there. You all have heard about carbs, fats, and proteins. Well, there's thousands of different kinds of carbs and thousands of different kinds of fats. And so not all of them have good effects on everyone, and not all of them have bad effects on everyone. And so nutrition is far, far more complex than just wheat and rice. Then we go into the gut microbiome, and so our gut microbiome test is the only one in the world that can not only identify every single microbe that lives inside of someone's large intestine, but also, very, very importantly, in fact, more importantly, we can see what those microbes are doing, because you should think about the gut microbiome not as a collection of microorganisms, but as a very large chemical factory. So when you consume food and it hits the large intestine, these microbes immediately jump on that food, and they're seeing that food as their food, and they're going to process that food chemically to extract energy from that food. And so when they convert that food into their poop, micropoop, that poop is actually what enters your bloodstream and regulates your physiology. And so the chemical reactions performed by the gut microbiome is what we assess, and those are far more important than who is there. Because if vitamin K comes into my bloodstream and my body's happy about it, I don't care whether it came from Coprococcus something or Bifidobacterium something. That doesn't matter. Those are made-up names by humans. That makes no influence on my physiology, what we named some microorganism. On the human side, we're measuring the human immune system. This was just touched upon a little bit, but I can tell you that this IgG, the immune response to different foods, has been life-changing for several people, including me. Life-changing. And then human metabolism we're measuring with a simple blood test that we're going to come out soon. And then the clinical status is very important. That's a little bit of a technical mumbo-jumbo. Okay, let's talk about machine learning. This is sort of the hottest thing on the planet right now. But if you give it lots of data and ask it to learn something, it's going to learn completely meaningless information. And so you have to be very careful. Just because something is machine learned, it doesn't mean it's meaningful at all, because machines don't know what it means. So we have a system that we follow at Vuyisich, which means produce good data, high quality data, develop the models, validate the models, revalidate the models, and then test the models. Okay, so this is the Vuyisich platform. We basically think of food as molecules. We think of microbes as a chemical factory, and we measure the activities of those pieces of factories. And then we associate the output of those factories with disease and health in our clinical trials and clinical studies. And so this is sort of our principle of how we approach things. I can just give you a couple of examples. If a person has a gut microbiome that will take something found in wheat and make a pro-inflammatory biochemical, our computer will take wheat and put it in the minimize list. If a person has a microbiome that will take something like eggs into something beneficial, an anti-inflammatory or to support your immune system, then eggs will be put in the maximize list, right, and the enjoy and indulge. So these are all mathematical algorithms that take into account this. So we've developed lots of these machine learned algorithms. This is a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, but we now have large clinical studies, greater than 950 participants each, and we have predictive machine learned models for IBS, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. So we're now using these models to develop personalized diets. I'll give you one specific example that has gone from an idea to now our customers actually benefit from this machine learned algorithm right in the app. Okay? So glycemic index. I think everyone knows about the glycemic index. It tells you, if you look at this table on Google, it tells you how high your sugar will go if you eat one of these foods. Is this personalized glycemic index? Does it say anywhere in there personalized? It's not. It's for that average human. I'm willing to bet that there's not a single person in this room that this glycemic index applies to. In fact, we have lots of data to show that there isn't anyone. So this is really an academic exercise, okay? And so what my wife and I observed early on is that if we eat the same portion of potatoes relative to our body weight, that our glycemic response is completely the opposite. And if we eat quinoa, it's very different. If we eat wheat, it's very different. And we've done this now many, many times with hundreds of people. And so if you want to eat carbohydrate-rich foods, which I need to eat, if you want to eat carbohydrate-rich foods and you want to have your blood sugar be the lowest and follow this, you could be making completely wrong choices, because this is for the average human and you're not one of those. And so here I'm showing you on the left side of this slide, we purchased these foods and we gave them to 2 different people, and you can see the glycemic response for the banana and the sprouted grain bread is opposite in 2 different people, completely opposite, right? And so we created a very large study, 550 people, and you can see here on the right side the meal plan. We designed a meal plan for them with 104 different meals that a human would consume. And so look at the staggering stats here on the left side. 550 participants. Everyone donated a stool sample right before they started the study. And then for the next 14 days, they consumed foods that we either gave them or that they chose, but they had to take a picture of it and input exactly what they ate. And so we fed the machines 18,000 provided meals, 9,000 participant-chosen meals, and we gave the machines the results of their glycemic response to every single one of those 27,000 meals, right? And the machines now developed an algorithm that is 80 to 90% accurate in predicting what is the glycemic response going to be to a meal for you based on our gut microbiome test. Not for someone else, not for your spouse, because my glycemic response is different than my spouse. That's why we eat differently. So this 90% accuracy is really the key point, because that is the theoretical maximum that we can reach, meaning that if you as the same person eats the same meal on 2 different days, there's going to be 10% variability in the glycemic response. And so the best we can possibly do is 90% accuracy, and we're there. So that means now you don't have to guess, are potatoes good for you, or is wheat good for you, is rice good for you, is quinoa good for you. The app tells you. So look at the example right here. I picked a person who's the opposite of me. They're told for couscous, it's put on the avoid list, meaning don't eat it. And the reason is because you have this person has a high glycemic response to couscous, and try substituting with quinoa instead. For me, it's exactly the opposite. When I go to quinoa, it says avoid it, but eat couscous because that's good for you, right? And it says right on the app. You don't have to guess. This is a machine-learned model. There is no nutritionist. There's no doctor. There's nothing. Mathematical algorithms applied to molecular data. And so this is hyper exciting to wake up every day and to work on this, where we're going from, well, in my experience, people who I gave this Atkins diet, they did better. There's no experience here. This is mathematical equations applied to chemistry of the gut microbiome that we measure. It's so awesome. Okay, last slide is Los Alamos, New Mexico. If you haven't heard of it or have been there, this is a picture of Los Alamos looking from west to east. We're at 7,200 feet. Not impressive for Aspen people, of course, but look at the mountains in the back, and that's the setting where Vuyisich was created. Now we're a global company. We have operations, we have offices in 6 cities, and we have 170 employees, and we're shipping our products globally, and we're expanding. So that's that. Thank you very much.
Dr. Pedre, would you come up before the panel?
Can we move closer a little bit so we're not blocked by that?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
We won't fall off.
I'm sorry that
Please come closer.
I'm sorry about, I don't know how
Okay.
to take that away. Thank you.
Oh, there we
Is it
go.
on?
You want us, you want to be in the middle, or you want us?
I don't care. Yeah, let me be on the end, and I can talk to both of you. too.
Sure.
The presentations both were fantastic. These were, is this on? Those were both really fantastic presentations. I'm sorry about the podium being in the way here, but I thought I would ask a few questions, and actually everything I thought I wanted to ask was slightly been covered. So let me just ask a few, and if you've already covered it, we'll, and then as soon as we're finished asking questions, I'm finished asking questions to the panel, please have some questions I know you must have about the gut microbiome and how we can use machine learning to help chronic disease. So, okay, how's that? My first one is just, why is fiber so important for gut health? What's the process or the need?
Oh, yeah. So if you think back to
You've got
the,
mics.
what I presented about the Hadza in Tanzania and how much fiber they eat, they're eating up to 50 grams of fiber a day, whereas the Western diet is devoid of fiber, mostly because of all the processing of the food. But the importance of fiber is that it's our way of communicating with the gut microbiome. So fibers are basically carbohydrates. They're short-chain carbohydrates that are not able to be digested by our own enzymes. So they bypass digestion in the stomach and the small intestine. They go to the large intestine where they become food for the gut microbiome. And they become a fuel for them. And as a result, what they do is they transform those fibers into what we call short-chain fatty acids. So things like butyrate, propionate, and acetate. But out of those three, the most important one is butyrate, because butyrate, it serves several roles. Butyrate is the primary energy source for the cells that line the colon. So butyrate helps keep your colon healthy and actually helps lower the risk for colon cancer. But the remarkable thing about butyrate is that it crosses the gut barrier as well, because it's a fatty acid, so it can go through the lipid membrane. And it influences insulin sensitivity as well. So it serves a role in blood sugar regulation. But I think the most remarkable thing about butyrate is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it has an epigenetic effect in the brain that increases the production of what Max mentioned earlier, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So butyrate from the gut helps you form memory and create new neural connections. So if you want a healthier brain, you need to eat more fiber.
So what are the biggest things we can eat for fiber?
Yeah, I mean, starting with leafy greens, and then like Dr. Momo was talking about complex carbohydrates, and then the question is which ones are right for you based on your microbiome. But I mean, the easiest way to start is we're not eating enough greens. You know, the average American eats about 2 to 3 servings of vegetables a day. A serving is about a cup. We should be getting 8 to 9 servings per day. So just even starting with that, increasing that. There's fiber in berries. Bananas have fiber. So really thinking about varying the diet, and like I mentioned, tubers. I mean, if you look throughout the world population, there's a lot of tubers.
What's a tuber?
A tuber is like a root vegetable. Sorry.
Name some.
Tubers are like cassava, like
Sweet potatoes, yams?
sweet potatoes. Yeah, exactly. So those are all tubers. And they're all in this classification kind of like potatoes, but they're different. They've got, potatoes are a lot of starch, not a lot of fiber. So tubers have a lot of fiber, not a lot of starch.
What else that we could get? Not as
Greens.
Actually,
Yeah.
wheat also has a lot of fibers. So
Yeah.
just go look at the different look at the nutritional information. So wheat has fiber, brown rice has fiber, and then inulin, for example, is found in artichokes or these are Jerusalem
chicory
artichokes,
roots.
chicory root. So psyllium, for example, is a great source of fiber. Inulin is a fiber you can buy. You can buy it organic from Amazon. Just order it. And inulin is one of these fibers that we cannot, inulin, I-N-U-L-I-N,
And we
inulin.
can have it in a pill?
You can, no, it's not a pill, it's just powder, and you add it to your shakes, for example.
I will add a caution on that, because inulin is a prebiotic. So it's another way of saying a fiber is a prebiotic. Prebiotics are what feeds the gut microbiome. But prebiotics can also lead to fermentation, and the byproduct is gas, right? So if you
and SIBO as well.
Yeah, and it could lead to imbalances, so like a dysbiosis. So if you're going to add any prebiotic, like in a powder form, you can start with like a 1/4 teaspoon. You start really small, testing, seeing what your body can tolerate. And if you start getting very bloated by taking a prebiotic supplement, then that might be a clue that you have a dysbiosis that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, so we are just listing general prebiotics, but not all of these are good for everyone. So,
And what about
But everyone should be eating greens.
what about
And I
beans?
mentioned-
Beans.
Yeah, that's a big question because, you know, there's all this stuff now about lectins
Yes,
and
so
the
I'd
effect
love
and
you to tell us.
anti-nutrients. But I just learned that Cuba is a blue zone, and in the
You eat a lot of rice and
ancestral
beans.
diet, there's white rice and black beans.
For sure.
And there's
Same in
so-
Brazil, where
But they
we live.
also have a very different gut microbiome from Americans. So just because beans work for them doesn't mean they're going
Right.
to work for us.
Exactly.
Very agricultural country. We have an autism study right now. Cousins of Cubans who still live in Cuba and their cousins who have immigrated to the United States, the cousins in the United States have 10 to 100 times greater incidence of autism. So genetically, they're essentially identical, but the lifestyle is different, and autism rates are massive in the United States. So
Understood.
very different lifestyle.
Is a diverse microbiome what we're after?
I want to say something more about butyrate. Butyrate is a great anti-inflammatory chemical, great anti-inflammatory. So if you have a normal digestion, normal gut microbiome, and eat a lot of fibers, and your gut microbiome is very happy because you're feeding it essentially, it's sending the signal of butyrate to our immune system saying it's all good here, you're fine. If butyrate is missing, your immune system freaks out and thinks something is wrong and mounts an inflammatory response. So that's one of the biggest effects we've observed, anti-inflammatory.
I actually use sometimes in patients who come in with severely disordered gut health and leaky gut, as I'm taking them through the healing process, I will put them on a butyrate supplement.
So unfortunately, butyrate supplement gets absorbed in the small intestine and gets processed by liver. So really the colonic production of butyrate is what we've only observed as associated with lower inflammation. So instead of butyrate supplement, we definitely recommend something like inulin or a different kind of a fiber to feed the microbiome, if they have it. If they don't have the right microbiome, then that's the last resort.
In cases with ulcerative colitis, you can actually do butyrate enemas.
Right, right.
Butyrate enemas.
Not fun, probably.
Okay. Is a diverse microbiome what we are after? And can we reverse chronic disease by diversifying our gut bacteria?
I can take that, my opinion. Yeah, so definitely we need to have a diverse gut. So that's why I said, please go read about rewilding the gut and follow his advice that he gave you. It was number 1, I think, diversify your gut. So just think of the human body as we have evolved to depend on chemicals produced by our gut microbiome. And these are hundreds or thousands of chemicals. And if you're missing microbes capable of producing those chemicals, like these short-chain fatty acids and vitamins, you simply don't get that benefit. And so you have to have a diversity. But there's more to it because depending on who is inside your gut, you have to adjust your diet to feed those members of your gut, and so that they can produce those beneficial chemicals. So there's
And
two
how
parts.
are we going to know which microbes are in our gut?
Well,
You have to do a test. I mean, you have to do a
Where
molecular
are we
test.
going to get the test?
Well, so I'm very biased.
Yes.
So I think our test is the best. But there are now companies offering these tests. But ours is the only functional gut microbiome test, which means that our test is the only one that has a readout of what the microbes are doing, not just who is there.
Oh, great, because that was going to be my second question is, does an average microbiome test tell which microbes are overpiomed and which ones are lacking?
Yeah, it does. It does. All of the
An
tests
average test will tell that, but your Viome's tests tell that it's what the microbes are doing.
Well, we
If
don't
you name them?
actually give that information to the customers. And honestly, I don't look at my test results. I look at my recommendations, and I follow my recommendations. You know, knowing that I have Escherichia coli in my gut microbiome, I know what that means because I've sort of developed this technology. But a common person will maybe read something bad about E. coli, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I have E. coli." But E. coli, turns out, there are strains of E. coli that help you absorb iron. You guys have heard about how some people just absorb poorly iron, right? That's not some magic. It's your gut microbiome has evolved to help you absorb iron. And Escherichia coli is known as a bad pathogen, and certainly there are strains of bad E. coli. But there are also some that are very beneficial. So if you see E. coli in your test, there's nothing necessarily wrong about it. But again, yeah.
I will add something to that because I'm so this is Viome is direct to consumer, and I'm on the practitioner side. So I'm doing analysis on the microbiome that I can act upon based on dysbiosis, imbalances. So I used slightly different types of testing that give me information that for me is useful clinically. So it depends on what you're looking for.
Will that lead to, precision nutrition? Will your recommendations be able to,
The Viome is more on the line of that.
but you make food recommendations?
What I'm doing with patients, and yes, there is, I do work on diet, but what I'm doing is reestablishing the balance in the gut microbiome when it's gone out of balance.
Well, that's my last question. Can we eat for specific microbe, addition or subtraction?
You know, what's interesting is that we talk a lot about eating. There was a study that showed that fasting can also increase certain types of microbes in the gut. The one I mentioned was Akkermansia muciniphila, which in a lot of people, when it's low, it's associated with weight gain and obesity.
Right.
And when it's high, it's actually associated with proper metabolic balance and balanced blood sugar levels.
So instead of eating for Akkermansia, you can fast
Well,
and
you've
have it
got
go.
to incorporate all of the recommendations, the time-restricted eating, and then eat the right foods or figure out what is the right template of the types of foods, because food is information. So you have to think of it when you're eating, you're actually eating for your microbiome. And how would you eat if it was to eat for your microbiome so you can be the healthiest possible?
So those are my questions. Thank you for the answers. And does our audience have some? I see in the back, please.
We will bring a mic to you.
We can, but I think the room is small enough that you can speak.
How often
It's always good to.
should the microbiome test be done?
Yeah, so the question is, how often should the microbiome test be done? We recommend every 3 months, and in fact, soon we're going with a subscription model where that's going to be included in the subscription. But there's lots of people that they change their diet and they're super happy and they're like, thank you very much, see you later. And so we probably won't hear from them until they get worse again. But the microbiome is changing continuously because we are interacting with the environment, and especially if you take antibiotics, it'll severely change your microbiome, and then you have to change your diet afterwards.
I mean, it's been shown in studies that dietary change results in a change in the microbiome within 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Right there, please.
A quick question, if you're thinking systemically about feeding a family, how do you integrate practices such as those you've spoken about when you might be feeding a family of 5 or 7?
I would say that you've got to start when they're young before they can develop bad habits. And you have to expand their palate so wide that when it narrows when they're 3 years old, that they still will keep pieces of this more expanded palate. So like for my son, we used to make a soup with onions, garlic, all sorts of vegetables in there, puree it, and he would drink it when he was still a toddler. But that expanded his palate, and then once he was eating, we incorporated salad, and now as a 14-year-old, he shocks people when he goes out because he'll be the one kid with his friends who's asking, can I order a salad with dinner? So you've got to start young before their palate goes like that. And then maybe if they're older, just start, maybe with a little bit of mindset training. Like, hey, your taste buds change every 7 years. So maybe something that you used to not like, why don't you try it again? Maybe it won't be so bad.
In my family, we have 3 different diets, and we all cook. And to me, that's the best way. Engage your whole family, and you can have sort of a core meal that satisfies everyone, and then you can have several additional side meals, and that they're all for different family members, and they all get to cook
That sounds good.
and socialize.
Right here?
Okay.
Yes?
One second.
Just 1 second.
Right here. Thank you.
Is the effect of fiber as good if you're getting it through a smoothie? You take the same amount of spinach, kale, whatever, versus eating it directly. How does that affect the fiber?
It is, because it's not digestible by our enzymes, so it is. Yeah, it's the same. You can
It's
put
the
it
same
in
effect.
any format you want. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that because doing that is a great way to start getting your servings of vegetables for the day, and just makes it really easy for your digestive system to use up.
Yeah, and I really want to reiterate, if you're not going to do a precision test, then start slow with these fibers because they can cause very, very bad things like lots of gas and bloating, and they can cause SIBO. Read about SIBO. It's not very fun. It doesn't just go away.
And if you increase fiber, you need to increase your water intake, because if you don't, fiber will constipate you.
Interesting. Yes, Karen?
My question is, does the microbiome affect hormones?
There's some literature. You can actually read about it, but I'm not going to make any conclusion at this point.
Yeah, we know that microbiome relates to hormone circulation in and out of the body. So for example, when estrogen is conjugated and secreted by the liver and the bile into the stool, if you have an overpredominance of certain bacteria that have an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, they can cleave that bond and then release the estrogen, and the estrogen recirculates into the body, being one of the factors in creating estrogen dominance. I also know that your microbiome is necessary for partially converting thyroid hormone T4 into T3. About 20% of the body's production of T3 is actually coming through enteric circulation and back into the body. The rest is being converted in the body. For those of you who know thyroid, T4 is the main hormone produced by the thyroid, but T3 is the active component of the thyroid hormone. So it's very important. When balancing hormone, I just know clinically from seeing my experience with patients that you need to balance the gut microbiome in order to have more balanced hormones.
Wow, so many questions.
Anywhere over there?
This is a deep topic.
We'll be available at lunchtime, and
Yes,
find us.
And into the
yes. We have one more little fun presentation after a couple more questions, then lunch, and you'll meet all the speakers at lunch. In fact, we should have networking tables. I don't know if we've done that, but we're supposed to.
What
Yes.
is the top probiotic you recommend?
As a pill, do you mean?
Yes, a supplement.
A
BSL number 3 was recommended to me, then I
Yeah.
found out that it was a stolen patent. So
That is
now
that's a difficult question to answer, but as a general rule of thumb, a multi-probiotic that has different strains of Lactobacillus bifidobacterium, Strep thermophilus, and maybe Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast. Yeah, it's a lot.
So everything.
But it depends, because one thing I
depends.
didn't mention in my lecture is that we've got about anywhere between 500, maybe up to 2,000 species of bacteria in our gut. So even a probiotic supplement that has 10 different strains, just think about what a small representation that is to what needs to happen in the gut to create balance. Now, that said, I see probiotic supplements help rebalance the gut for people, and there's evidence that some probiotics actually help influence the lineages of other bacteria in the gut. For example, like the spore-based probiotics actually increase the amount of bifido and lacto in the gut. So it's it's kind of complex because it depends on what the underlying issue is. So, and the strength of the probiotics. So if you have a yeast overgrowth, I have patients that I treat with probiotics that are 225 billion colony-forming units, or CFUs, until we start getting the yeast under control and I start dropping the probiotic. But always remembering that it's not just about probiotic, it's about diet. And the way you ultimately control your microbiome is through your diet, but also through balance, meditation, relaxation, stress management.
Yes?
You mentioned one thing you did or one thing you ate that transformed your
mystery.
health.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, so do we have 3 minutes? Okay, so you can write this down. The molecule is called NEU5GC, NEU5GC. So this molecule is a type of a sugar called sialic acid, and it's produced by all mammals except for humans. So we have the ability to consume it from all mammalian products. That's all red meats and all dairy products, right? And we have the ability to absorb it into our body and actually incorporate it on the cell surface of our own cells, because we used to do that as humans until we lost the ability to produce it about 2 million years ago. So I integrate that molecule into my own cells, and my immune system says, well, wait a minute, this is not your molecule, this is a foreign molecule. And because it's a sugar, the immune response is very weak. And so it takes time for it to mount. But basically, my immune system continuously thinks that there's a foreign body in my system. And so it mounts this inflammatory response, and it destroys my joints, it destroys my soft tissues, and it destroyed my blood-brain barrier, which is why I had psychological problems or neurological problems. Not psychological, I was fine. So,
When you ate red meat, is that what?
yeah, so anything that comes from mammals, right? Mammals are a group of animals that produce milk, right, that lactate. So anything that comes from them, if I consume that, my immune system will increase inflammation and I will have problems, right? So this was diagnosed, so I'm seronegative rheumatoid arthritis and HLA-B27 positive ankylosing spondylitis, and I was diagnosed by doctors as having an autoimmune disease. That is 100% false, 100%. I do not have autoimmunity at all. As soon as I removed that molecule from my body, a month later I felt better, 2 months later I felt great, and a year later I was completely healed. So there was no autoimmune whatsoever.
Please say what the molecule was.
Yeah, so the molecule is this new 5GC.
No, is it red meat? Is it meat? Is it
Any red meat,
Give
any
some
milk.
examples,
So chicken, so not chicken, sorry, pork, lamb, beef, right? So it's bad. So pork, beef, and lamb are bad for me, right? For me. Now this is a genetic defect in 100% of all humans, right? So I know that I'm not the only one. I actually met with the professor who discovered this mechanism, and he'd talked to many other people who discovered the same thing about themselves and completely cured themselves. So I know I'm not the only one. I just don't know how common this is. I don't know if 100 million people have increased inflammation due to this, or 5,000 people in the world. I have no idea, but I think it's very common. I just don't have any evidence for it. So all red meat, so when people say pork is a white meat, no, it's not. Well, I mean, red meat is not a scientific term. The scientific term is any product that comes from a mammal, and mammal is very well defined scientifically. You don't have to guess. Like chickens are not mammals. You cannot milk a chicken, right? Fish are not mammals. If you cannot milk it, it's not a mammal. So yeah, I used to go to restaurants and say, I cannot eat anything mammalian. They're like, so you can't have chicken? No, you cannot milk chicken.
That's a great use of the 3 minutes. One more question, and we are...
I just want to say, so for your own research, if you just Google new 5GC, and then a term such as inflammation or cancer. So this is one of the main studies that drove WHO to name red meat a carcinogen, right? So the cat's out of the bag, but of course there are many people who do not want this to be known, right? But look at the paper, the seminal paper was published in late 2014, that this molecule drives immunity, which drives inflammation and drives cancer. So look it up. It's pretty
Thank
cool.
you. One more question, Laura.
Have you known about it?
Mine's more of a comment, but a few years ago, I went through a lot of chronic stress and developed diverticulitis.
Louder.
And so what happened was I went on a course, a path of self-healing. But there was this one place I couldn't get rid of inflammation in my left side of my colon. So I did the Vuyisich test. And in 4 days after avoiding the foods, which by the way, every morning I was having a smoothie with green apple juice. I'm allergic to green apples. That was a void. Red peppers, yellow peppers, all the things I was eating. 4 days after I stopped, the inflammation went away, and it's been 6 months.
Wow.
So I just wanted to say that to
Bravo.
everyone.
Thank you.
Here we go.
It's so true.
Thank you all. One more. We're going to get that. Thank you very much.
All right.
We've got Gina Murdock, but we're just going to take the chairs off. Get ready for something fun.
I'm gonna pull the chair away from you.
Oh, thank you guys. That was amazing. Oh, no, this is fine. So please stick around just for a few more minutes, especially you speakers right here. We have a really special experience coming up, something that's going to be fun and entertaining. and hopefully be good for your health. So, as some of you know, I'm Gina Murdock, the founder of Lead with Love, and I wanted to talk just briefly about the neuroscience of leadership. And we're going to get to a part that's going to really entertain you, and especially Glenda. This is something that's near and dear to her heart, so I hope you will stick around. In leadership, what do we know? That people who are led by love versus fear, that actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system versus the sympathetic nervous system. So take a look at some of these stats. When you're led by fear in an organization or in your family, by the way, maybe giving them some of those weird foods these guys are talking about with their children's, the neural circuits with fear creates impairment in the body. So this is the fight or flight response. And with a loving response, you have neurogenesis. So this is just my credential to get me in the door at the Brain Lab, is why I created this slide. So I hope that you enjoy that and it really shocks you and makes you realize this statement. To be a good leader, you must lead with love. I don't know who said that. Somebody brilliant. Oh, it's Gina Murdock, the founder of Lead with Love. There it is. So we haven't touched on this, and I'm surprised because the Cigna Healthcare Organization has created a study, and it's been widely cited, around loneliness. So I'm going to depress you for just a few moments before we get into this really fun activity that we're going to do. Loneliness has the same impact on mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, making it even more dangerous than obesity. So don't worry about what all these expert, brilliant people are saying about food. You need to have some friends. And this is important. Look at this. In 1985, people said there was only 3 people they claimed as a close confidant. In 2004, it dropped to 1, with 25% of Americans saying they don't have anyone to confide in. That means 1 out of 4 people in this room means they don't have someone that they can call a close friend. That's probably not the case here. I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm just shocked by these statistics. Lack of social connectedness predicts vulnerability to disease and death above and beyond traditional risk factors such as smoking, blood pressure, and physical activity, and probably diet. So Brené Brown is a famous and best-selling author and researcher, and I think this quote is very true, and it's about our health and our brain and our gut and all these things. A deep sense of love and belonging is an irresistible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we were meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt others, and we get sick. Sorry, we can... So there's a term called skin hunger. Do you know that nowadays there's people that get paid to be professional cuddlers? I would be good at that job because I love to snuggle and cuddle. But 3 out of 4 Americans agree with the statement, Americans suffer from skin hunger. More Americans live alone than ever before. And again, people don't have anyone to talk to. So what are we going to do about this? You can reprogram your brains to become happier. This is good news. And this is a famous report about positive psychology. In just 21 days, you can reprogram your brain. So instead of thinking negative thoughts that are toxic to your body, you can reprogram your brain to think positive thoughts. I hope you guys would agree with this. This is called the Tetris effect. So I want us to experiment just for a moment with something we call mirror neurons. So the neurological geniuses in the room will know all about this, but I want you to look at somebody in your table and just take it, easy. If you don't find anybody, you can come look at me. But I want you to smile at that person and see what happens. Look in their eyes, connect with them, and smile. So mirror neurons in your brain, when somebody smiles at you, that same effect is happening in your own brain. Why is this important? Well, because we affect each other. We are interrelated and interconnected. So here's some things that we can do to combat this loneliness and these things that are a bigger detriment to our health than almost everything that we've heard this morning. You can think positive, be kind to yourself and others, and be grateful. And I also suggest, and I'm not an MD, but that you should hug somebody. So please stand up. And I want you to just let yourself choose one person nearby that you would like to give a hug. And while you do so, I'm going to share with you some of the positive attributes of hugging. So you're releasing a feel-good hormone called oxytocin, lowering your blood pressure, alleviating fears. It's good for your hearts. You're reducing cortisol, and you're going to be happier and healthier. I suggest holding on for more than 1 second, maybe 3 seconds. Try it till it feels awkward. Come on, heart to heart. Don't be scared. What the heck? Stop, you already did it. Do it again. Do it again. Oh, and Glenda, come and help me for this one. The other thing that you can do is laughing. So laughing reduces stress hormones, increases health-enhancing hormones, boosts the immune system. So Glenda and I, we love to laugh, and that's why we're so healthy and happy. And it doesn't matter if it's spontaneous laughter or if you fake it till you make it. So everybody, let's take a deep breath in through our nose. Exhale audibly out through your mouth with a inhale through your nose and exhale out through your mouth. One more time, inhale through the nose and start laughing. Keep going, inhale. Oh, you slay me, Glenda. I'm telling you, look at these benefits. You can either eat a lot of kale or you can start laughing more, hugging more, and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I mean, who wants a fecal transplant? Not me. Not me. Now, the last thing that we can do to improve our health that is way more important than anything else you've heard today is dance. So this is going to release endorphins, reduce depression, anxiety, and boost self-esteem. So cue our very favorite John Travolta from 19-something, because we are the dancing queens, and I want to invite all of the speakers up on stage, and you can go ahead and play that right now. All the speakers, come on up. You guys, we need you. Kendra, we need you. Come on. Anybody who's got some good dancing moves, let's see what you got. Come on. All right, Louie, let's go. Anybody who's got good dance moves, we're going to need some good dancers up here. Come on, Kelly. That's right. You are improving your health right now more than you ever knew. And it's way more fun than meditating, too. Yeah. Yeah, crank it up. You guys, turn it up. More, more, more. Yeah. All right. This was Glenda's choice, you guys. Little disco action. Whether you're a brother or whether you're a mother, we're staying alive. All right, look at this crew. Yeah. Woo. All right, come on up. Anybody else want to try their dance moves? Oh, Robbie, come on up here. And all the speakers are required. All right. Show us your moves, you guys. Yeah. Look at Glenda, everybody. Should we do a conga line? All right, conga line to lunch. Here we go. You guys stay here. We're going to do a conga line if you guys want to come to the lunch. Come on. All right. Here we go. Who's joining? Oh, you guys are. Here we go. Nobody wants to join the conga line? You guys will do it. Let's go. Let's go. You're leading. Come on, conga line. You know what a conga line is? Come on, here we go. All right. Join in the conga line. There we go. We got some takers. Conga out to lunch, everybody. Let's do it. Come on. Let's go. Yes. Woo. All right. Keep it going. Keep it going. All right. There you go. All right, everybody, it's lunchtime, so have a wonderful time and come back by 2 o'clock. you guys.